He thinks you're pushing the folks at Cypress Grove too hard.
Big deal. One little dastardly drop marathon. It only took 10 minutes.
It premiered on September 14th, 1985, and within weeks, it was clear that something unusual had happened. 4 women of a certain age had made a television show that everybody watched, that won every award it was eligible for, and that is still running in syndication more than 40 years later. The Golden Girls gave us Dorothy, Blanche, Rose, and Sophia, and the women behind those characters each had a story far bigger than the house in Miami. Here's the Golden Girls cast, then and now in 2026. And yes, some of those faces are still with us. B. Arthur, Dorothy Zbornak. Beatrice Arthur was born Bernice Frankel on May 13, 1922 in New York City and grew up in Cambridge, Maryland, where her family moved when she was young and opened a clothing store. She was tall from an early age, nearly 5 feet 10 inches by the time she was 12, and self-conscious about it in ways that she later said she masked through humor and a particular kind of wry, weaponized wit that became her signature for the rest of her life. She served in the United States Marine Corps Women's Reserve during World War II, working as a typist and truck driver at Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point in North Carolina, before returning to New York to pursue acting. The early years were hard and slow. She worked in theater through the late 1940s and 1950s, doing everything from classical productions to nightclub singing to summer stock, building a reputation as a stage actress with an unusually powerful instrument, that deep, resonant, almost baritone voice that eventually became one of the most recognizable sounds in American comedy. A voice that arrived in a room before the person carrying it did, and that could deliver a line with a precision of timing that made even the simplest sentence land like a verdict. She appeared in the Threepenny Opera off-Broadway in 1954 in a production that also featured Lotte Lenya, and the two women reportedly became friends. She was, at this point in her career, building something that would take another decade to fully arrive. Her Broadway breakthrough came in 1964, when she was cast as Yente the Matchmaker in the original production of Fiddler on the Roof, starring Zero Mostel. It was a supporting role, but people who saw that production came away talking about her. 2 years later, in 1966, she originated the role of Vera Charles in Mame, Angela Lansbury's acerbic, fashionable best friend in the Jewel Stein/Jerry Herman musical directed by Gene Saks, whom Arthur had married in 1950. The New York Post's Richard Watts described her performance as a portrait in acid of a savagely witty, cynical, and serpent-tongued woman. She won the Tony Award for Best Featured Actress in a Musical. Jerry Herman said later, "She would make us laugh during rehearsals with a look or a word. She didn't need dialogue." She repeated the Vera Charles role in the 1974 film version of Mame opposite Lucille Ball, the only major film role she took in that period, before the bigger career-defining moment arrived from an unexpected direction. In 1971, producer Norman Lear invited her to guest on All in the Family as Maud Findlay, Edith Bunker's cousin, a liberal, politically outspoken woman who drove Archie Bunker absolutely up the wall. The character was so popular that Lear created a spin-off. Maud ran from 1972 to 1978, tackling subjects that network television almost never addressed at the time, including, famously, abortion, and winning Arthur the Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series in 1977. The show ran in syndication for decades afterward and is still regarded as one of the most socially significant American sitcoms ever produced. By 1985, Arthur was 63 years old, had 2 Emmys, a Tony, and a reputation as one of the most formidable comedic performers in the business. The role of Dorothy Zbornak suited her with the kind of precision that happens rarely. The sardonic, tall, divorced substitute teacher who served as the show's emotional and logical center. Dorothy was the one who reacted to everything. She was the person whose dignity was perpetually under assault and who defended it anyway. She was the character who made you believe that intelligence could coexist with deep, unglamorous loneliness, and who made that combination funny rather than sad through nothing more than the quality of her timing and the specificity of her expression. A look from B. Arthur at the wrong moment, or the exactly right moment, was funnier than most performers' best lines. She won her second Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series in 1988 for the role. She appeared in every episode of all 7 seasons. Though her relationship with Betty White off-screen had its rough patches, the tensions between them have been documented variously over the years. Arthur's more reserved, professionally formal style clashed at times with White's relentless cheerfulness, but neither allowed it to affect their work on screen, where Dorothy's relationship with Rose was played with consistent warmth and comic authority. After The Golden Girls ended in May 1992, Arthur chose not to continue in the immediate spin-off, The Golden Palace, which continued with White, McClanahan, and Getty in a hotel setting without her. She worked selectively in television and film, appearing in For Better or Worse in 1995 and Enemies of Laughter in 2000, while concentrating on stage work and the occasional special event. She returned to Broadway in 2002 with a one-woman show, B. Arthur on Broadway, Just Between Friends, a collection of stories and songs from her own life and career with musician Billy Goldenberg. The show received warm reviews and was nominated for a Tony Award for Best Theatrical Special. She made appearances at tribute events and award shows through the 2000s. In 2003, she reunited with Betty White and Rue McClanahan for a Golden Girls reunion special on Lifetime. But Estelle Getty, already in significant cognitive decline, was absent. The 3 remaining cast members made public appearances together to promote DVD releases through the mid-2000s. Their last public appearance together was at the TV Land Awards in 2006, where all 3 received a standing ovation for the Pop Culture Award. B. Arthur died on April 25, 2009, at her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles. She was 86 years old. The cause was lung cancer, which she had kept private. The family asked that donations be made to PETA or the Art Attack Foundation in lieu of flowers. The lights on Broadway were dimmed in her honor the following evening. Betty White, Rose Nyland. Betty Marion White was born on January 17, 1922, in Oak Park, Illinois. Legally Betty, not short for Elizabeth, and was the only child of Horace and Christine White. Her family moved to California when she was 1 year old, and she grew up in Los Angeles, graduating from Beverly Hills High School in 1939. She wanted to be a forest ranger. Women were not permitted to hold that position at the time, which meant she had to find another way to channel the energy and curiosity she would have brought to that job. She drove a PX truck during World War II as part of the American Women's Voluntary Services, delivering supplies to soldiers stationed in Santa Monica and Hollywood. She appeared in an experimental television broadcast in 1939 when the technology barely existed outside of laboratory demonstrations, and worked in radio through the 1940s before television became the medium that would define the next 8 decades of her professional life. In 1949, she began co-hosting a local Los Angeles television program on KLAC with Al Jarvis. She was on local television essentially continuously from that point forward, hosting, producing, and performing at a time when the industry's default assumption was that women could do none of those things. In 1971, she hosted The Pet Set, a syndicated talk show about celebrities and their animals that reflected a lifelong commitment to animal welfare that ran alongside her entire career. She served as a trustee of the Greater Los Angeles Zoo Association for decades. donated to the American Humane Association and the Fund for Animals, and was, by any serious accounting, as devoted to animal welfare advocacy as she was to performing. Her national profile grew significantly through The Mary Tyler Moore Show, where she was cast as Sue Ann Nivens, the happy homemaker, a character whose cheerful, homespun surface concealed a competitive, frankly libidinous interior that delighted audiences from 1973 to 1977. Mary Tyler Moore had originally described the character she wanted as sweet as Betty White and as vicious as a barracuda, and then suggested they actually ask Betty White to do it. White won Emmy Awards for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series in 1975 and 1976 for the role. When the producers of The Golden Girls were casting in 1985, Betty White was originally offered the role of Blanche Devereaux, the flirtatious, romantically adventurous Southern belle. Rue McClanahan was originally offered Dorothy. Both women objected. White felt that playing Blanche would be too similar to Sue Ann Nivens, another calculating seductress, and McClanahan felt that playing Dorothy alongside Arthur would echo too closely her years as Maude's best friend on the Maude series. The roles were switched. The switch transformed the show. Betty White played Rose Nyland, the sweet, chronically naive, deeply sincere widow from St. Olaf, Minnesota. Rose was the character most likely to tell a long, meandering, completely irrelevant story about life back home. She was the character who understood animals better than most humans, and whose goodness was so unguarded that it occasionally drove her roommates absolutely mad. White played her with a kind of technical mastery that looked like guileless warmth, knowing exactly where the audience was laughing and calibrating her performance against it, not into it. The character required her to underplay constantly, to give the comedy room to breathe. And she did it with a consistency that never flagged across 180 episodes. She won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series in 1986 for the role. After The Golden Girls ended in May 1992, she continued as Rose in the spin-off The Golden Palace and in guest appearances on Empty Nest and Nurses. In 1995, she was inducted into the Television Academy Hall of Fame alongside Dick Van Dyke. Her career adaptability in the decades that followed was remarkable. Lake Placid in 1999, in which she played a sweet-seeming woman who turns out to be a foul-mouthed protector of the giant crocodile eating local residents, was a deliberate self-subversion that she described as some of the most fun she'd had on a film set. She made recurring appearances on Boston Legal and Ugly Betty. She provided voices for animated productions. She won another Emmy in 1996 for a guest appearance on The John Larroquette Show as herself. In 2010, a Facebook campaign demanding that she host Saturday Night Live attracted more than 500,000 members and eventually produced an actual hosting engagement. She was 88 years old. The opening monologue and every sketch she appeared in demonstrated exactly the timing and commitment that had defined her work 60 years earlier on KLAC in Los Angeles. Hot in Cleveland, the TV Land Ensemble comedy series that premiered the same year gave her a regular role alongside Valerie Bertinelli, Jane Leeves, and Wendy Malick that ran until 2015. She was in her 90s, making a sitcom, doing physical comedy, and receiving the show's best individual reviews. In 2013, the Guinness World Records certified her as the television personality with the longest career in the entertainment industry, a record she had earned over more than 7 decades. She was 91 at the time. She was asked regularly what her secret was, and her answers were consistent. Keep busy, keep your sense of humor, love your animals, and don't spend too much time looking at yourself in the mirror. On January 17, 2021, her 99th birthday, she told Entertainment Tonight that she was working on getting the pet set re-released and that she was feeding the 2 ducks who came to visit her every day. 18 days later, having celebrated what turned out to be her final birthday, the world began building up to what it assumed would be a very public 100th birthday party in January 2022. It never happened. Betty White died on December the 31st, 2021, at her home in Los Angeles. She was 99 years old, 18 days short of the centenary that everyone had been planning to celebrate. She was the last surviving Golden Girl. Her friend and agent Jeff Whitja said in a statement, "I will miss her terribly, and so will the animal world that she loved so much." I don't think Betty ever feared passing, because she always wanted to be with her most beloved husband, Alan Ludden. She believed she would be with him again. Rue McClanahan, Blanche Devereaux. Eddie Rue McClanahan was born on February 21st, 1934 in Healdton, Oklahoma, a small oil town in the southern part of the state. Her father was a contractor and her mother was a homemaker, and she grew up in a community where ambitions of the kind she carried weren't particularly encouraged. She studied at the University of Tulsa, where she became involved in theater, and later trained at the Actors Studio in New York, where she became a lifetime member, an affiliation that gave her professional credibility and a network of serious working actors that sustained her through the years before the Golden Girls changed everything. She built her early career in regional theater and New York stage work through the 1960s, developing a range across drama and comedy that she rarely got sufficient credit for. By the 1970s, she was working steadily in television, appearing in a long list of series and television movies that kept her employed and visible without making her famous. Her professional connection to B. Arthur predated the Golden Girls by more than a decade. McClanahan had appeared alongside Arthur and Maude from 1974 to 1978, playing Vivian Cavender Harmon, Maude's best friend and next-door neighbor. The dynamic the 2 women developed on Maude, Arthur's laser precision and McClanahan's warmer, more emotionally available energy, gave each of them an instinctive understanding of how to work against the other's strengths. When both found themselves in the same house in Miami a decade later, they already knew exactly how to play the room. When the Golden Girls was originally cast, McClanahan was offered Dorothy, the sardonic, tall, controlling character that eventually went to Arthur. Her reservation was genuine and practically grounded. Playing Dorothy would feel too similar to playing Maude's supportive, foil-style friend, and she was worried the audience would see her as a lesser version of something they'd already watched. The switch gave her Blanche Devereaux instead, and Blanche turned out to be the role of her career. Blanche was the vain, flirtatious, romantically insatiable widow who owned the Miami house and who navigated the world on the assumption that she was the most desirable woman in any room she entered. The character could have been simply comic, a one-note joke about a woman who was too old to be behaving the way Blanche behaved. McClanahan made her something richer than that. Blanche's constant romantic activity was always just beneath the surface, driven by genuine loneliness, by the specific grief of a widow who had genuinely loved her husband and who filled the space his absence left with attention from men who were poor substitutes. The Southern accent was entirely McClanahan's own invention. It was not written into the character description and was not asked for by the producers. She introduced it in early rehearsals, and nobody objected because it worked immediately and completely, giving Blanche a specific regional identity and a specific set of cultural assumptions that the other 3 characters could calibrate against. The accent also gave McClanahan a physical tool, something to hang the characters' cadences and gestures on in a way that kept the performance fresh across 180 episodes. She won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series in 1987 for the role. After The Golden Girls ended in May 1992, she continued the character in the Golden Palace spin-off, as well as guest appearances in Empty Nest and Nurses, that let her reprise Blanche in different settings. She continued working in television and theater through the 1990s and into the 2000s with a consistency that showed she had no interest in resting on the Blanche legacy. Among her later roles was a recurring part in the dark comedy web series and television adaptation of Sordid Lives in 2008, in which she played the elderly eccentric mother of a drag queen, a performance that received enthusiastic reviews and demonstrated that she was willing to go to stranger, more interesting places than the Golden Girls franchise might have implied. She had undergone heart bypass surgery in 2009, a serious procedure that complicated her overall health in the year that followed. She had been dealing with its aftermath when the final crisis arrived. Rue McClanahan died on June 3, 2010, at New York Presbyterian Hospital in New York City. She was 76 years old. The cause was a brain hemorrhage. Betty White, who had been her close friend through the Golden Girls years and beyond, said in a statement, "I treasured our relationship. It hurts more than I ever thought it would, if that's even possible." Estelle Getty. Sophia Petrillo. Estelle Getty was born Estelle Scher on July 25, 1923, in New York City, the daughter of Charles and Sarah Scher, Jewish immigrants from Poland who had settled in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Her father ran a small business. She grew up in a neighborhood dense with immigrants and working-class families, where survival and humor were closely related, where the ability to make your neighbors laugh was not a frivolity, but a form of social connection. She knew from early on that she wanted to act. She studied and worked in New York theater through the 1940s and 1950s, doing everything the New York stage offered to someone without name recognition or industry connections: community theater, small off-Broadway productions, summer stock, anything that kept her working and developing. She was good. People who saw her in those years said she was good. The career simply didn't happen the way it was supposed to. The decades passed. She appeared in a role in the 1982 film Tootsie, the Dustin Hoffman comedy in which Hoffman plays an actor who disguises himself as a woman to get work, in a small supporting part that showed what she could do. She had a role in Mask in 1985, the Peter Bogdanovich film about Rocky Dennis, a young man with a severe facial deformity, in which Cher played his mother. These were films that proved she could handle serious dramatic material with the same ease she brought to comedy. She was 62 years old when she auditioned for the Golden Girls. 40 years of work, and the role that would define her entire career was sitting just ahead. The creators had imagined Sophia Petrillo as an elderly Sicilian woman, Dorothy's mother, who had been living in Shady Pines retirement home until it burned down in a grease fire, and who came to stay in the Miami house. Sophia had suffered a stroke that damaged the part of her brain that controls social inhibition. This meant she said exactly what she was thinking at every moment, with no filter, no softening, no diplomatic editing. It was a character concept that required an actress who could deliver devastating honesty and make it funny without making it cruel, and that was a far narrower needle to thread than it looked. The complication was that Getty was actually 1 year younger than B. Arthur, who was playing her daughter. The production applied aging makeup to Getty for every episode, a process that involved prosthetics and careful contouring that added decades to her apparent age. She wore the makeup so completely and so consistently that the audience never questioned it, and most viewers genuinely believed that Estelle Getty was elderly. She was not. She was a woman in her early 60s playing a woman in her early 80s, and the only thing that gave the game away was knowing her real birth date. She won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series in 1988 for the role. She participated in all 7 seasons, though in the later seasons of the show, her health was already beginning to present challenges. The difficulty memorizing lines that emerged in the final years of the show was an early indicator of the neurological condition that would eventually claim her. After The Golden Girls ended in 1992, she appeared in the Golden Palace spin-off and continued in guest appearances on Empty Nest and Nurses. She also appeared in the film Stuart Little in 1999, in a role that she credited as one of her last genuinely enjoyable professional experiences. Her last credited performance came in 2001. The disease that took her was Lewy body dementia, a progressive neurological condition in which abnormal protein deposits called Lewy bodies form in the brain, disrupting movement, cognitive function, and eventually the capacity to manage daily life. It is a particularly cruel disease because it strips away the person gradually and with moments of relative clarity mixed into the decline. By the early 2000s, Getty was largely unable to engage with public events or appearances. She was notably absent from the 2003 reunion special on Lifetime, where Arthur, White, and McClanahan appeared together. She spent her final years in a care setting in Los Angeles, largely away from public view. The women she had worked with visited her through those years. Betty White spoke about those visits with characteristic directness and care, acknowledging that it was hard to see, and that the Estelle Getty who had lit up a set and delivered some of the sharpest comedy in television history was still there in some form inside the person. The disease was steadily diminishing. Estelle Getty died on July 22, 2008 in Los Angeles. She was 84 years old. She died 2 years and 9 months before Bea Arthur, the woman who played her daughter, who was born on May 13, 1922, a year after Getty. She is buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills. The Golden Girls aired from September 14, 1985 to May 9, 1992. 7 seasons, 180 episodes, 10 Emmy Awards for the show itself, and individual Emmy Awards for all 4 of its leading actresses. It was the only show in television history in which every regular cast member in the lead ensemble won an Emmy Award. It produced 4 spin-offs: Empty Nest, The Golden Palace, Nurses, and Boca. It has been in continuous syndication for more than 4 decades, and it has reached new audiences in every generation that has encountered it because the things it was about: loneliness, friendship, growing older with grace, the insistence on finding joy in circumstances that don't necessarily deserve it, don't expire. The cheesecake at the kitchen table, the lanai with its rattan furniture and Florida light, the theme song, all of these have passed from popular culture reference into something closer to shared cultural memory. The 4 women who made it work each brought something that the others couldn't have substituted for. Bea Arthur brought authority and wit and a quality of reaction that was its own kind of comedy. Betty White brought warmth and a technical mastery that was invisible because it was so complete. Rue McClanahan brought her Southern character's vanity and her own genuine humanity, and the accent she invented that gave the whole show a specific tonal register. Estelle Getty brought 40 years of experience and a character whose apparent age was entirely a product of skill and craft. Together, they created something that the individual sum of their parts didn't suggest. The show was also, for its era, genuinely ahead of where American television normally sat. It addressed death, loneliness, HIV/AIDS, sexual health in older women, homosexuality, racial prejudice, and economic insecurity with a consistency and a frankness that most network television of the late 1980s avoided. It did this through comedy, which meant it got away with things that more earnest treatment would never have survived. The 4 women trusted the material and trusted the audience, and the audience trusted them back. The cast consumed over 100 cheesecakes during the show's 7-year run, as bakeries from across the country sent in desserts for the production. Bea Arthur hated cheesecake in real life and never ate it on camera. Estelle Getty went first. In July 2008, Bea Arthur followed in April 2009, Rue McClanahan in June 2010, and then Betty White on the last day of 2021, the last Golden Girl at 99 years old. All 4 of them are gone now, but the show itself hasn't gone anywhere. Thank you for being a friend. If this kind of television history is what brings you here, hit that like button and subscribe. We've got a lot more of it coming, and we'll see you for the next one.